We are live. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted, and I have the great pleasure to introduce Éric Hébert, who's a senior CISO and a good friend, and I've known him for quite some time. And it's a real pleasure to have you here, Éric. Looking forward to the conversation. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me. And yes, it's been a while. It's been more than 15 years, as we were saying before coming on live. So I've been following you on the web and from a certain distance, and it's good to see you, and good to see you're still in the biz and in the know. So happy, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So you held many senior roles across different industries and so on. Maybe just to ease ourselves into the conversation, how did you get started in cybersecurity? Do you remember the first roles, the first things you've done, maybe the academic background and so on? I know down memory lane, Éric.
Yeah, it's down memory lane, and it all started, strangely enough, and this will give away my age. It all started with an Apple II and a 300 baud modem. And this was for the younger folks that are listening to us. This was pre-internet. The only way you had to get online was on the data pack network with X25 communication. So it wasn't even TCP/IP at the time. So we had a lot of fun poking around Bell networks and different stuff, maybe at 16, 17 years old. So that's how basically everything started. And then went into networking, installation, local area networks. Then in the late 90s, the internet popped up. And everybody started coming on board, and early adopter. And this was really huge change, right? Knowledge accessible at your fingertips and so on. And kept on moving up through roles. Had my first CISO gig in 2003, 2004 for a financial institution.
Éric, that's amazing. It really is. Yeah. I think 2003, correct me if I'm wrong, I had a chance to interview the first CISO ever with Citibank. But 2003, it wasn't that popular. That role wasn't, I think companies were just starting to figure out that they need somebody.
Absolutely. I was the first CISO of that business, that investment business, which was a reasonable size, 500 to 600 employees, which was a good size to start in a CISO role and getting to talk to management and the board and upper executive. So that was my segue into really formalizing a pure security function. I lasted 4 or 5 years. Then I went to entrepreneurship. Had a business with some buddies, which did good. Did that for about 5 years. Then went on into consulting, pure consulting on my own. Became CISO again for a media company for another 3 years. And the average tenure of the CISO is 2 years, right? So I did 3. I think that was good. And yeah, did a lot of consulting after that for a lot of firms, and had a third and final, and I'll tell you maybe a little later why I call it final, CISO role for a large multinational with more than 10,000 employees and offices and subsidiaries pretty much all around the world. So I had fun with that for a little more than 2 years. And today, here I am.
And tell me, when back in 2003, today the CISO role is much more defined than it used to be, because there are, so the expectations are there, fairly refined. Also in terms of the frameworks. There's a lot of frameworks that are available for you. There's a lot of experience, common knowledge. And so when you come into a role, the first 60, 90 days, there are certain things you need to do, and you can follow those. And it's pre-established. It's like a playbook where you follow. But back in the day, it wasn't the case. First of all, information wasn't available. It was all new. Frameworks were still early inception. There were some frameworks, but not. And everything was just growing exponentially in terms of risks. But then on the other side, it was like everything was unscripted, pun intended.
Yeah.
Walk me through, how did you manage to juggle all of these? What was your... Because I think that the CISO role back then was way more difficult than it is today.
It was and it wasn't, and I'll explain why. First of all, there was a lot less vectors to address. Identity management was one of them. And I remember we used to say as a joke, if you had a firewall, an antivirus, and an anti-spam, basically you had the basics, and that was more than 20 years ago. The challenge then for me, and right, you're talking today, the 60, 90 days, it's pretty much cookie cutter. You do your analysis, your evaluation, you prioritize according to risks, and then you roll out a roadmap, you go fast for budget, and boom, there you go. But at the time, and there was nobody to teach you this, was how to talk to other. I was younger, of course. I was 27 years old, younger, but there were no role models really on how to get an IT guy or an information security professional to get to. And I've seen many CISO, Rick Wall, right, being too technical, not talking the common language of the business, not knowing the business. So this has been detrimental to a lot of CISOs and has hurt credibility throughout the years. So really, at the beginning in 2003, you basically were walking on eggs, right? Because you didn't want to say too much. You didn't want to get too technical. You wanted to say the right things. So there was a lot of observation of senior executives going around to learn how to get that vocabulary, get those key phrases, and what were the power relationships that made it so you could get budgeting and who had formal and informal powers. So there was a lot of dynamics, internal dynamics to be studied. And that for me was really key in learning how to be this, because if you don't have that upper level of communication, then you're at the director level, you'll report to a CIO.
And not even that. It wasn't a boardroom level discussion like it is today. Cybersecurity wasn't.
I would say it was, and it still isn't. Boardroom discussions are happening maybe a little more frequently. You get your 15 minutes, you get your 30 minutes, you do an annual review. I've reported to a number of boards and audit committees for public companies and public and private companies also. It's still one of the many facets of running a business and what they need to know. And so the challenge is to really pinpoint what is of interest, what should be on, what they absolutely need to know, what is the main risk, how you're progressing, how you're addressing, and keep the message in a simple way. More discussions are happening, but for most companies, I'm French, right? So I have French words popping into my mind.
Eric, you can plug those in. We can use AI to translate those.
For most companies, right, cyber is something that needs to be addressed, but for most companies, it's on a cycle, right? Something happens or they get told something, and then they get the money, it gets budgeted. You get 2 or 3 maybe good years, and then the curves fall down, right? Because something else pops up and priorities change. But during the time that the investment cycle goes down, you're actually losing from a security maturity perspective. So you're trending down, and then at one point it starts to go back up again, but you have some catch up to do, right? Because the investment is not, except for certain industries, financial services is one of them, and some other deep R&D, or you'll have sustained investment over time from an information security perspective. But for most sectors, it's just not the case. So composing with that is, it's also an emotional roller coaster, right? Because you're good when you have money, you can hire people, you can do projects, you can implement processes. But then when things start trending down and you need to cut people, cut projects, and so on, then, it's a ride. It's a ride. And being a CISO is a ride.
And the risk gets back elevated again, and you have to ride those. Do you find that those curves are the amplitude is diminishing in terms of how quickly these cycles are now have to be implemented? I remember back in the day, companies had 2-3 years to look at solutions, implement them, and deploy. But now it seems like if they do that, by the time they deploy, the solution may be obsolete.
From my observations here in Canada, it's still let's say a 3-year cycle. And budgeting, you'll spend at least half a year, depending on when you start doing budgeting and doing planning and then getting approvals. So let's say you're starting January 1st, 2023, building a team, getting the project guys, project people, and going into RFP for solutions. You're talking 6 to 9 months, right, before you start project and implementation. And then, of course, you have l'opérationnalisation. You have to operate with your teams the solution. So for any medium to large size project, it's usually 2 to 3 years. As for the amplitude, and it's the board or the CFO will give you the money for a 3-year plan or a 2-year plan. You'll report on progress and so on. And what's really hard is finding enough people to do it. And this crazy expertise crunch is hitting seniors. A lot of people, maybe a little older than us, but not too much, are retiring en masse, and I've seen this during COVID. So a lot of very senior talent have left the market. So a lot of young folks are coming around, juniors, but it's not the same, right? When you've done our job for a number of years, you're more efficient than somebody who's just starting up and needs to learn the ropes and so on and so forth. Getting projects done is, in my opinion, it's going to take longer in the coming.
And is this sufficient? Because the modus operandi of the adversaries is ever changing. You can see that, for example, in the ransomware, like the tools they use. Yes, of course, some of this is basic and it's always been going to be the case, but it looks like the reason why it's so hard to defend these organizations, because whatever form of attack that they use in 1 month can be completely changed the next month. And that's my point. Are we not adaptive enough and quick enough? Because if it takes us 6 to 9 months to just make a decision on technology and then we train the staff and so on, how do we keep up with the risk associated with running the business?
There's two things. First of all, I don't think you need to add a technology anytime you have a new risk. There's a lot of area to cover from a business perimeter perspective, be it in the cloud or being decentralized or whatnot. There's a lot of perimeter to cover, but I think more tools is not the key. I think is resiliency. How fast can you adapt how fast can you adapt your tools and to either prevent or detect new forms of and types of threats? The problem with resiliency is that resiliency for me is based on competent people that know what they're doing and that know their field. So when you're running maybe 20-30% attrition each year and you lose seniors to competition, to manufacturers, to whatever and whatnot, keeping that resiliency is going to be very hard, because you're losing knowledge, you're losing intimate and integral knowledge of your business from people who've been there 5, 10, 15 years, and that hurts. So the real question now, of course, probably the follow-up is, what can we do about it, right?
And then what about the promise of automation or orchestration? Remember, we were supposed to have a lot of it already solved, and you're sighing because I don't know if that's the case.
I believe in automation for today, okay, and I'll give you my opinion today, and this may evolve with time as technology evolves and so on. I think for common low-level tasks, there is a value in automation. If you're running a big business and you have a big team and you need to automate ticketing, opening and closings, and you need to automate some dashboards or production of vulnerability management scans and so on, I believe there is value in that. I would less rely on automation for, let's say, automated threat hunting, so on, and discovery, and less on that. Some tools such as VDRs have some automation built in to react to certain pattern attacks, and that's fine. But automation across tools like SOAR and so on, I don't think we're there yet. And it also goes, right? It also goes back to people. You have 2-3 people specializing in your automation tools, and what happens? And we know IT people are not the best in documenting processes and procedures. It falls on the wayside. What has been automated stays there and it doesn't evolve, and you're still paying licenses for a tool that is only providing maybe 20 to 30% value.
So you were managing teams, security teams. How did you deal with that attrition? And I believe now it's job satisfaction, the post-COVID, the silent quitting, all these is becoming front and center, and it's, as you mentioned, it's really hard to keep people, motivate them, especially those who are very high in demand in terms of skill set. So you as a senior manager, how did you deal with that? What was your way to cope with that? Because you had to.
Yeah, there's basically, for me, there's 3 keys, right? First ingredient would be, and some stuff is obvious, and I'll go into the less obvious at the end. Provide challenges and treat them well is 1. Pay them fairly is 2. Not overboard, but pay him a good market rate. And this is hard, right? Because when you're managing a bunch of people, you have to go to HR, you have your pool, everything's decided on a corporate level. Getting the rarity factor for security people is harder.
And also, no, I would add to that you have to also think about for example, the cost of living, geolocation. Montreal might be different from somewhere else, and you might find an exceptional person who resides in Quebec City but does not want to relocate to Montreal. So then how do you deal with that? And you're right, it's the people, the decision makers on the compensation, not necessarily are well versed in terms of security talent and demands and compensation. So you had to make that juggling act.
So there's only so far as you can go, right? Because you cannot create policy, because that's not the CISO's job. It's HR's, and it's the VP of HR's job, right, to create remuneration policies and so on. So kind of to retain exceptional talent, you always have to push the envelope and keep on pushing and keep on pushing. And sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. And when you don't, sometimes you will lose the resource. But the third key that for me, the third element, which is key, is be a good boss. Okay. And there's tons of posts on LinkedIn and whatnot on how to be a good boss and what's a good boss and what's not a good boss. And I find a lot of those things are true. Listen to your people. I have always had an open door policy, right, to not have a super strict in Canada. I know in some countries it wouldn't work, but here it works. So have an open door policy. Listen to your people. Listen to their concerns. Be empathetic to their personal situation, because life happens, and we have life. We have a professional life, but we also have a personal life. And when you can, try to accommodate. So being a good boss, providing good challenges, and having fair pay for me are the three components of it. I think it's the most I can do to keep a team and try to diminish attrition.
But this is something you had to learn. Aside from being technical and have the acumen on the technical side, which is one area of be able to be successful, the soft skills and then the leadership, it's really all about leadership, as you mentioned. Trying to figure out what it is that they want and be able to provide that in such a way that they want to continue working with you. And a lot of times that's what I think that it's part of the resilience of the organization. So I think people are forgetting it's not just about the technology, it's definitely about the people, but the people, it's also about the management, how they lead, in how cohesive, how effective, how the cybersecurity team works together and operates and feel like they have a common mission. And all of that is something you had to, it's on the job training. So you were very young when you became a manager. Are there any things along the way that were memorable because again, you learn from experiences that you as a manager had to deal with, and maybe successfully or maybe unsuccessfully?
There's a lot of anecdotes, but you're right when you're saying there's a soft skill side / leadership, and there's the technical aspect. I think the split is 50-50, because if you want to be a good CISO, you need to know how security stuff works. You need to know, not only what are the risks, but what are the real life probabilities, right, of getting attacked through a container? What are the real life probabilities? Because there's so many space to cover. There's so many things you can do, but how do you set your priorities? Okay, what's going to hurt the most? Access management, it's huge now with SaaS, now with cloud access, there's a lot of stuff to address. So knowing how to prioritize, for me, you don't learn in a textbook. You learn by doing, you learn by knowing, trying stuff, and really getting to know how an attacker, or how somebody who wants internal threats, somebody who wants to defraud the company, somebody who wants to exfiltrate information, somebody who wants to attack and get some ransomware going. So once you have that down, you learn to prioritize, but then the other half of the job is selling it. So you need to sell it to your boss. You need to sell it to the CFO. You need to sell it to the CEO. You need to sell it to the board. You need to sell it to the audit committee. The only you don't need as much to sell it to your own team because they will know it's the right thing. Most of the time they get it. Okay, because they're specialists and they'll say, okay, this makes sense and let's go forward with this.
I think you're right. They'll know, but they'll know because if they trust you and believe that what you are saying is the right thing to do, and it's part of being that leader. If you have a conflict or you're not an effective leader, they may or may not say, that's what he's saying, but potentially it's not what we think, and then you have a little bit of a conflict. It sounds like the hard work just starts as after you go through all the technical details and figure things out and figure the risk and where to make the investment and so on. There's a lot of heavy lifting required right after you figure out the technical details.
Absolutely. And the politics side is as important as the technical side. And I've seen too many people or too many CISOs or information security directors focus on the technical and not focus on the politics side. And that never ends because they end up confined within their toolbox and their tool set and their people, and they don't have the overall view of where the business is going. So they put themselves in the reactive mode. So they were always reacting, and who wants to invite the nerdy guy who only talks technical to the exec party, right? No one. So if you can't have that type of soft skills, that's how you're gonna get confined, and you're gonna be dissatisfied as a CISO because you're gonna say to yourself, I don't have input, I don't have power, I don't have money, I don't have people, I don't have what I need to do my job. But part of your job is going to get those things, and the way to get those things is by developing rapport with upper management.
And you don't develop that by having geek speak.
No, definitely not. I've seen people go to I rehearsed with some CISOs, right? Their pitch to the board and so on, because I've done a lot of coaching throughout the years, and I've seen people very technical presentation, 12 slides full of stuff. Don't do that. You're dead. 3-4 slides, 3-4 bullets per slide. Keep it simple. And you want one thing. What is it? What do you want to communicate and what do you want? That's it. What do they need to know and what do you want to get? 2 things. That's it. Thank you. And I've seen people been invited once to the board and then never again. And that's sadly missed opportunity for a lack of preparedness on soft skills, which are crucial.
And I have another question, and it's tremendous value right there. If a CISO or aspiring CISO that listen to us, don't blast them with technical slides, as you never be invited back. How do you then also show value? I think that we're in a difficult spot where we defend the organization and nothing happens, but nobody comes over and pats us in the back because if you do a great job,
nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Absolutely. And for more than 20 years, we've been talking about ROI, ROSI, the return on the security investment. One easy way you can, and it's not, I don't like it, but unfortunately, it's one of the ways we can demonstrate is compliance. Okay. And compliance for me is not security. It does not equal security. But compliance is a way that execs understand that there is a framework or a legal obligation to comply with something, and that we are compliant because we have merged our capabilities to the requirements. And this is a checkbox. So they know this because audit has been around for hundreds of years, and in financial notions of audits are commonplace. So compliance is one way to communicate that you are doing a good job. Another way, which is opportunistic, is when everybody's blowing up around you and everybody's having ransomware. Then you can say, I've done this. I've said all of these guys, full and local, have been hit in the past year, and we haven't. This is a way to demonstrate that your security investments are helping in the protection of the enterprise. But if you want to talk risk quantification, if you want to talk I think there's a lot more studies from a college or university perspective. There's a lot more PhD thesis that needs to be put. There's a lot more effort on the thinking side of this that needs to be put before it can be actionable in a common sense type of way. There will always be. It's a nice exercise. It gives some. I've done some risk. I've tried risk quantification on some projects with the FAIR model, and you get big numbers, right? But when you look at all of the systems have big numbers. So you're back to square one, right? Okay, they're all putting multi-million dollar risk. What's my investment strategy? Where do I start? What are the most? And you can't bring that back up to the executives. Because if everything is a risk and everything is a high risk, they're going to go. So it's a credibility issue. So there's a lot more thinking from a getting stuff to the board and speaking to the board. There's a lot more thinking on that than on let's do our job. Because like you said at the beginning, doing our job is getting more, I wouldn't say easier, but it's more defined than it used to be. So we have recipes. You need incident response. You need vulnerability management. You need IAM. We didn't have that before. Now we do. So it helps. But, and just to come back full circle, it also comes back to capacity issue. Right? Do you have enough people? Because it's huge. And if you want, you can't do everything. So how do you decide what to do, what not, what to put aside, what to put towards a later date? And how do you leverage? And I'm not an opponent or proponent, but I can see that there is value in some types of MSSP services. Of course, you don't offload the risk, but you offload the workloads, part of the workload on security issues. So yeah, it's a lot of balls to juggle.
What about potentially benchmarking yourself with others in the industry? Again, it's something that I think everybody would like to do that, but there's some issues with that. Maybe you can get the lights on that.
Benchmarking is nice, but, and talking benchmarking or CMAs, right, capability maturity assessments, and so on and so forth. The latest ones I've seen, and no later than a couple of weeks ago, because I have a lot of clients that share their CMA reports with me, so I see a lot of them. Over 100 and 120 points are evaluated. That's a lot. Knowing where you're at is good, but I think intrinsically, a lot of CISOs know what their maturity levels are, and they don't necessarily need some, but it reassures the board. Okay, we've done this, we know, and it helps to justify some of the investments. The issue I have is not so much as with the CMA evaluation per se, but with the priorities. Because I find more and more, a lot of the priorities strangely coincide with stuff that the people who did the CMA want to sell.
What do you say, Eric, you say strangely?
Yeah, maybe just happenstance. I don't know. But it looks, so I think it helps. But I'll give you an example. Nice CMA, nice prioritization of stuff to do, right? To get those low levels or 1 or 2s up to 3, 3.5. But there's no capacity to do it. There's no team. Okay? And they didn't evaluate that. They don't evaluate they do evaluate some of the response capabilities, but they do not look at the organizational perspective. Is there enough people? Are the teams structured correctly for the sector or for the company?
So you throw it over the fence?
Yeah.
And say, hey, here you go, fix this.
My job was to do a CMA and to derive where the priority is listed. So I've done my job. But then what's left to do for the CISO is to take this and to say, we would like to put this forward, but we can't. Because we don't have the people, we don't have the structure, we don't have...
And Eric, it's almost like it's always a perpetual case where you always are going to have some areas where you're lacking or don't have the resources. It's a moving target. It's not like one day you'll get this report and you're going to say, oh, yeah, voila, I can just go out and fix all of these, and within 6 to 12 months we're going to get to the standards we want. This never happens in a perfect world.
Okay, here's my take on it. The words that will be sold are continuous improvement. Real life is there is no continuous all-improving flow of money that's going to come your way, right? So at one point, you will have to say, this is what I'm covering. This is my box. This is what I'm going to optimize, and this is what I'm going to cover. And we will just keep an eye out here for new threats and new stuff that could really hurt, and then we'll come back. But for me, it's not, for me, information security, and I see a lot of businesses and big companies doing this, it's an ever expanding balloon. At one point, the balloon's going to pop because there's no...
The universe of cyber.
It keeps on inflating, and more money and more tools and more people. I've never heard a CISO say, I have enough people or have enough money, but we need to have people. We need to have leaders, information security leaders that can say, to run, it's going to cost 10 mil, and we're going to be able to fit most of the security activities to cover major risks in that amount. And then maybe you can go and get a 10% per year increase, but it's not, because information security is full of surprises, and execs hate surprises. So how do we modulate the messages so that we can temper the surprise effect of information security on budgets, planning, and so on?
Eric, amazing conversation. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. We'll definitely do one more, maybe like early next week. But before we do that, I would love to hear what you're working on today, number one. And secondly, how do people reach out to you for consulting, more information, and just in general getting in touch? Because you do know a lot of people, and I think even the people that know you will have a lot to gain from just hearing this conversation.
Thanks. I was lucky enough to the summer off, and one of the big decisions I took was that I would never be CISO again. I've done it 3 times, and it's a hard job. It's a thankless job.
You have the scars to show to.
Yeah, I've done it. I've been there, done that. Got the T-shirt, and I'm fine with that because I know what the job entails, and I have the scars. Enough with the scars. So my new venture, and you're getting an awesome preview here, is I'm going to be launching my own security consulting firm, which I want to build on, which will not be a solo consulting effort like it is right now. And my goal is to offer some distinctive services, which I don't think are fully covered by the market right now. And one of those services, I'll just name a couple if you don't mind right off, is I will do CISO coaching. CISO and information security director. So all that we have been talking is the fruit of 30 years of experience. So new CISOs, and I don't want to see people getting hammered by the board anymore. So coaching and mentoring is going to be part of my service offering. Tactical consulting. A lot of big fours do the strategic stuff. They'll do the CMA, but when the rubber hits the road, or how do I implement this type of project? What do I have to worry about? How do we scope? And scoping is the all-important, most encompassing issue in any information security project. Is what's the box? Where do we start? Where do we end? What do we put in it? So those type of strategic coaching will do. And I have a service offering also for the small to medium enterprise, 25 to 250 people businesses. Basically, it's you get 15 deliverables, bam, you get a couple of strategic, couple of tactical, and a couple of operational, and bam, you have the basis of an information security for small business. And I haven't seen this package quite the way we're doing it. So a couple of stuff like that. I have partners signed up. My new company name, website will be, I don't know when we're going to broadcast this, but hopefully it should be up at around on the 15th of January. It's going to be called Sandstorm Cyber. So sandstormcyber.com, and you'll be able to see the 6 service offerings I have to offer.
I love it. Absolutely. And I think that there is huge demand, especially on the SMB side, where they sometimes they're under scrutiny, regulation, almost the same amount of requirements and quite a high risk as well, but without the skill set associated. And they don't have a CISO full time. They have limited resources. So I think that by itself would be very valuable, because I think a lot of people or a lot of companies are struggling with it. And as I always said, it's the backbone of any economy.
Yeah.
Whether it's for Canada or the U.S., it's a backbone, and the strong backbone for economy is a strong country. So I think it's just something it's a matter of national security, and you, by providing that service, will contribute to that.
Yeah, they're the ones most likely to be hit by ransomware, right? Because they have basically no detection, no response. They don't know what to do. So getting them some help, and I've already sold a couple of these packages for a start. But yeah, I hope it works.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. And Eric, what we're going to do is, I think that the next session, maybe once you launch, maybe I would love to go through it and go through like the offering. And what's interesting about what you were mentioning is the offering come from that 30 years of experience, meaning that because you've been there, done that, and seen the requirements, and you see what's available in the marketplace. Again, I think entrepreneurs, at least from the ones that I interviewed, and I've interviewed quite a few, the best success stories are the ones that they've come across an issue that no one else solved.
Yeah.
And it's from their own experiences. And then they went and created something to solve that problem. And it's exactly what you described. I was there. I saw the issues. I saw the challenges. I saw there's no answer, and I decided to go ahead and create myself and contribute to the fact that you've experienced what it is to be a CISO and wanted to make a change, a personal change. So, combine it's best of both worlds. Okay, perfect. Until then, so you mentioned this
Sandstorm Cyber, sandstormcyber.com. The website should be up on 10 days from now. So on January 15th, launch on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. And you want to get in touch, all of the info will be there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So until then, thanks to all those who joined us today. Stay safe online as well as offline. And Eric, thank you very much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, and then we'll be in touch soon, and we'll do this again soon once you launch.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you again.